Question 1. Process analysis reveals that a prospective student, while preparing for the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University entrance exam, witnesses another candidate engaging in what appears to be a clear violation of the exam's academic integrity rules. The witnessing student is unsure of the best course of action to uphold the fairness of the examination process. Option A. Confront the other candidate directly about their suspected misconduct to deter them from continuing. Option B. Report the observed academic misconduct directly to the university's admissions committee or the designated proctor, providing a factual account of the incident. Option C. Discuss the observed misconduct with other prospective students to gauge their opinions before deciding on a course of action. Option D. Ignore the observed misconduct to avoid potential conflict or repercussions. Correct answer is B. Report the observed academic misconduct directly to the university's admissions committee or the designated proctor, providing a factual account of the incident. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires navigating the complex interplay between academic integrity, university regulations, and the ethical obligations of a student. The core challenge lies in determining the appropriate course of action when a student discovers potential academic misconduct by a peer, balancing the desire to uphold fairness with the potential consequences for all involved. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any action taken is both compliant with Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University's entrance exam regulations and ethically sound. The correct approach involves a direct and transparent reporting of the observed academic misconduct to the designated authority within the university, as stipulated by the university's internal regulations concerning academic integrity. This approach is correct because it adheres strictly to the established procedures for addressing academic dishonesty. By reporting the incident through the proper channels, the student acts responsibly and allows the university to investigate and adjudicate the matter according to its own established rules and guidelines, thereby upholding the principle of academic fairness and the integrity of the entrance examination process. This aligns with the university's commitment to maintaining a fair and equitable assessment environment for all prospective students. An incorrect approach that involves confronting the peer directly before reporting the incident is professionally unacceptable. This bypasses the university's established disciplinary procedures and could lead to a confrontation that escalates, potentially compromising evidence or creating a hostile environment. It also places the reporting student in a position of judgment and enforcement, which is not their role. Furthermore, it risks misinterpreting the situation or acting on incomplete information, which could unfairly accuse a peer. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the observed misconduct, is also professionally unacceptable. This failure to report constitutes complicity in academic dishonesty and undermines the integrity of the entrance examination. It violates the implicit ethical obligation of students to contribute to a fair academic environment and can lead to a perception that such behavior is tolerated, thereby eroding the credibility of the university and its admissions process. A third incorrect approach, which is to discuss the observed misconduct with other students before reporting it, is professionally unacceptable. This constitutes gossip and can lead to the spread of misinformation, prejudice, and undue pressure on the accused student before any formal investigation. It also risks creating a biased environment for any subsequent investigation, and can be seen as a breach of confidentiality and a failure to follow proper reporting protocols. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the university's academic integrity policy and the designated reporting mechanisms. When faced with suspected misconduct, professionals should first identify the relevant university regulations. Then, they should gather factual information without making assumptions. The next step is to report the observed facts to the appropriate university authority, allowing them to conduct a fair and impartial investigation. This systematic approach ensures compliance with regulations, upholds ethical standards, and promotes a just and transparent academic environment. Question 2. Process analysis reveals that an applicant for the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University entrance examination is unsure about the extent to which they can seek clarification on examination questions from a proctor during the test. The applicant has reviewed the general admission guidelines, but finds no specific clause addressing this particular scenario. What is the most appropriate course of action for the applicant to ensure compliance with the university's regulatory framework? Option A. Use a mobile device to quickly search for information related to the question online, assuming that such research is permissible if not explicitly forbidden. Option B. Refrain from asking the proctor for clarification and answer all questions based solely on their own understanding, even if it means leaving some questions unanswered or answering them with uncertainty. Option C. Discreetly attempt to consult with another applicant during the examination to gain insight into how they are approaching the challenging questions. Option D. Proceed with the examination, interpreting the silence in the guidelines as implicit permission to ask the proctor for clarification on any question they find difficult. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the examination, interpreting the silence in the guidelines as implicit permission to ask the proctor for clarification on any question they find difficult. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires navigating the complex interplay between academic integrity, university regulations, and the ethical responsibilities of an applicant. The applicant must demonstrate not only knowledge, but also adherence to the established procedures for university entrance. The core challenge lies in understanding the scope and limitations of permitted assistance during the examination process, ensuring that any support received does not compromise the authenticity of their performance. The correct approach involves the applicant independently completing all sections of the entrance examination, relying solely on their own knowledge and understanding. This aligns with the fundamental principle of academic integrity, which is paramount in any educational institution, including Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University. University entrance exams are designed to assess an individual's preparedness and aptitude without external aid. Adhering to this approach ensures that the applicant's results accurately reflect their capabilities, upholding the fairness and validity of the admission process. This is implicitly mandated by the university's commitment to admitting students based on merit and genuine academic achievement, as outlined in its admission regulations and examination guidelines. An incorrect approach would be to seek or accept assistance from a current student or external tutor to answer specific questions during the examination. This constitutes a direct violation of academic integrity and the university's examination rules, which strictly prohibit any form of unauthorized collaboration or external help. Such an action undermines the purpose of the examination, which is to gauge the applicant's individual competence. This behavior also demonstrates a lack of ethical judgment and a willingness to circumvent established procedures, which are critical qualities for future maritime professionals who are expected to operate with honesty and integrity. Another incorrect approach would be to consult unauthorized reference materials, such as textbooks or notes, that are not explicitly permitted by the examination instructions. While seemingly less direct than receiving help from another person, this still represents a breach of examination protocol. The university's regulations specify the conditions under which materials can be used, and deviating from these conditions is a form of academic dishonesty. This action suggests an applicant who may not fully respect or understand the importance of following rules and procedures, a critical failing in a field that demands strict adherence to safety and operational protocols. A final incorrect approach would be to claim ignorance of the examination rules regarding assistance and proceed to answer questions with the assumption that some level of help is permissible. While genuine ignorance might be a mitigating factor in some contexts, university entrance exams typically come with clear instructions and guidelines that applicants are expected to read and understand. Failing to do so, and then acting on assumptions, demonstrates a lack of due diligence and responsibility. This approach indicates a potential for misinterpreting or disregarding regulations in the future, which is unacceptable for individuals entering a profession governed by stringent rules and standards. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough review of all provided examination instructions and university regulations prior to the exam. Applicants should err on the side of caution, assuming that any action not explicitly permitted is prohibited. If there is any ambiguity, it is the applicant's responsibility to seek clarification from the examination proctors or university administration before the exam begins. During the exam, the focus must remain on applying one's own knowledge and skills, maintaining a clear understanding of the boundaries of acceptable conduct. Question 3. Process analysis reveals that an applicant for the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University entrance examination is unsure about the permissible reference materials during the exam, Which of the following actions best demonstrates adherence to the regulatory framework for this entrance exam? Option A. Asking current students of Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University for their recollections of what reference materials were allowed in past exams. Option B. Assuming that standard maritime textbooks are generally permitted in university entrance exams and bringing a selection. Option C. Contacting the examination proctor during the exam to inquire about the specific rules for reference materials. Option D. Thoroughly reviewing the official entrance examination guidelines published by Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University for any mention of permitted or prohibited reference materials. The correct answer is D. Thoroughly reviewing the official entrance examination guidelines published by Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University for any mention of permitted or prohibited reference materials. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires navigating the complex interplay between academic integrity, university regulations, and the ethical obligations of an applicant. The applicant must demonstrate not only knowledge, but also adherence to the established procedures for university entrance. Misinterpreting or circumventing these procedures can lead to disqualification, undermining their entire application. Careful judgment is required to ensure all actions align with the stated requirements. The correct approach involves meticulously reviewing the official entrance examination guidelines provided by Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University. This approach is right because it directly addresses the requirement to adhere to the specific regulatory framework of the exam. The university's guidelines are the definitive source of truth for what is permitted and expected during the entrance process. By consulting these, the applicant ensures their actions are compliant, demonstrating respect for the institution's rules and a commitment to ethical conduct in academic pursuits. This aligns with the principle of regulatory compliance, which is paramount in any formal examination setting. An incorrect approach that involves seeking informal advice from current students about exam content or format fails because it bypasses the official channels of information. This can lead to misinformation and, more importantly, may violate rules against seeking unauthorized assistance or attempting to gain an unfair advantage. Such actions undermine the fairness and integrity of the examination process, which is a core ethical principle in academic admissions. Another incorrect approach, which is to assume that general knowledge of maritime studies is sufficient without verifying specific exam requirements, is professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to recognize that entrance examinations often have unique parameters and expectations beyond general subject matter. It shows a disregard for the specific rules set by Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University, potentially leading to an applicant being unprepared for the actual assessment or inadvertently violating a rule they were unaware of due to this assumption. A further incorrect approach, such as attempting to contact the examination board directly to request clarification on questions during the exam itself, is also professionally flawed. This is typically not permitted during an examination and constitutes an attempt to gain an unfair advantage or disrupt the examination process. The established procedure for clarification, if any, would be before the exam begins, not during its administration. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. 1. Identify the governing regulations. Always start by locating and thoroughly understanding the official rules, guidelines, and procedures specific to the situation. In this case, Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University's entrance exam regulations. 2. Prioritize official sources. Rely exclusively on information provided by the official authority, the university. 3. Assess actions against regulations before taking any action. Evaluate whether it aligns with the established rules. 4. Seek clarification through proper channels. If ambiguity exists, use the designated methods for seeking clarification, typically before the critical event. 5. Maintain academic integrity. Always act in a manner that upholds honesty, fairness, and respect for the examination process. Question 4. The monitoring system demonstrates a recurring anomaly in the emergency lighting functionality within the main training vessel simulator, potentially indicating a breach of the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea (SOLAS). Chapter Roman 3, Requirements for Emergency Equipment. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the university's head of maritime training to ensure regulatory compliance and student safety? Option A. Advise the faculty to inform students about the potential issue with the emergency lighting and instruct them to be extra vigilant during simulator sessions. Option B. Initiate a formal investigation into the anomaly involving relevant technical staff to verify the system's status and identify the root cause, while simultaneously documenting all findings and reporting to the Dean of Academic Affairs. Option C. Instruct the simulator technicians to conduct a quick visual check, and if no obvious fault is found, resume normal operations, noting the anomaly for future review. Option D. Temporarily disable the simulator until the anomaly is fully resolved to prevent any potential safety risks to students during training exercises. The correct answer is B. Initiate a formal investigation into the anomaly involving relevant technical staff to verify the system's status and identify the root cause, while simultaneously documenting all findings and reporting to the Dean of Academic Affairs. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between operational efficiency and the strict adherence to maritime safety regulations. The university, as an educational institution training future mariners, has a paramount responsibility to ensure its training programs and facilities meet the highest safety standards, as mandated by international and national maritime law. The monitoring system's findings, if accurate, point to a potential deviation from these standards, requiring immediate and decisive action. The challenge lies in balancing the need for prompt corrective measures with the procedural requirements for investigation and documentation, all while maintaining the integrity of the training environment. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of verification, reporting, and remediation, strictly adhering to the internal regulations of Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University and relevant Russian Federation maritime safety legislation. This approach prioritizes safety by immediately flagging a potential noncompliance issue. It then mandates a thorough investigation to confirm the findings and identify the root cause. Crucially, it requires formal reporting to the appropriate university authorities and, if necessary, external regulatory bodies, ensuring transparency and accountability. The subsequent implementation of corrective actions, based on the investigation's findings, guarantees that the identified risks are mitigated, thereby upholding the university's commitment to safety and regulatory compliance. This aligns with the principles of proactive risk management and the legal obligations of maritime educational institutions. An incorrect approach that involves ignoring the monitoring system's alert or dismissing it without proper investigation is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. It directly contravenes the duty of care owed to students and staff, and violates the principles of maritime safety management systems, which require all reported anomalies to be investigated. Such an action could lead to serious accidents, loss of life, and significant legal repercussions for the university and its leadership. Another incorrect approach, which is to immediately implement drastic, unverified changes without a proper investigation, is also professionally unsound. While appearing proactive, it can lead to unnecessary disruption, wasted resources, and potentially introduce new, unforeseen risks if the initial findings were inaccurate or misinterpreted. It bypasses the crucial step of understanding the problem's scope and cause, which is essential for effective and sustainable solutions. This approach lacks the rigor demanded by regulatory frameworks for incident management and corrective action. A third incorrect approach, which is to only address the issue if it directly impacts a scheduled inspection, demonstrates a reactive and compliance-driven mindset rather than a safety-focused one. Maritime safety is a continuous process, not a periodic event. Waiting for an inspection to address a known or suspected deficiency is a failure to uphold the ongoing responsibility for maintaining a safe training environment. This approach risks overlooking critical safety issues that could arise between inspections, potentially leading to incidents. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the university's internal safety policies and procedures, as well as the applicable national and international maritime regulations. When a potential safety issue is identified, the first step is always to verify the information. This is followed by a structured investigation to determine the facts. Based on the verified facts, appropriate corrective and preventive actions must be developed and implemented. Throughout this process, thorough documentation is essential for accountability and continuous improvement. Professionals must prioritize safety and regulatory compliance above all else, fostering a culture where reporting and addressing safety concerns is encouraged and rewarded. Question 5. Process analysis reveals that a cadet at Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University witnesses a fellow cadet engaging in a clear act of academic dishonesty during an important examination. The cadet is aware of the university's internal regulations regarding academic integrity and the procedures for reporting violations. Considering the university's specific regulatory framework, what is the most professionally appropriate course of action for the cadet to take? Option A. Confront the fellow cadet directly about the observed academic misconduct and attempt to resolve the issue informally without involving university authorities. Option B. Ignore the observed academic misconduct to avoid potential conflict or negative social repercussions within the cadet corps. Option C. Discuss the observed academic misconduct with other cadets to gauge their opinions and potentially form a consensus before taking any action. Option D. Report the observed academic misconduct directly to the dean's office or the relevant department head, following the university's established procedures for academic integrity violations. The correct answer is D. Report the observed academic misconduct directly to the dean's office or the relevant department head, following the university's established procedures for academic integrity violations. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge related to the ethical conduct and professional responsibility of a cadet at Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University, specifically concerning the reporting of academic misconduct. The core difficulty lies in balancing the cadet's obligation to uphold academic integrity with potential personal repercussions and the university's established procedures for handling such matters. Navigating this requires a thorough understanding of the university's internal regulations and ethical guidelines. The correct approach involves a cadet directly reporting the observed academic misconduct to the designated university authority, such as the dean's office or the relevant department head, in accordance with the university's internal regulations on academic integrity. This approach is ethically sound and professionally responsible because it adheres to the principles of honesty and accountability fundamental to academic and maritime professions. Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University, like most reputable institutions, will have specific procedures for reporting and investigating academic dishonesty. Following these procedures ensures that the misconduct is addressed formally, fairly, and within the established framework, thereby upholding the integrity of the educational process and the standards expected of future maritime professionals. This direct reporting also protects the cadet from accusations of complicity or failure to act. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the observed misconduct. This fails to uphold the cadet's ethical duty to maintain academic integrity and could be seen as tacit approval or complicity. It also bypasses the university's established mechanisms for addressing such issues, potentially allowing academic dishonesty to persist and undermine the credibility of the institution and its graduates. Another incorrect approach would be to discuss the observed misconduct with other cadets or peers before reporting it. This can lead to gossip, speculation, and potentially false accusations, creating a hostile academic environment. It also deviates from the official reporting channels, which are designed to ensure a fair and impartial investigation. Furthermore, it could be perceived as an attempt to gather support or influence others, rather than a straightforward report of a violation. A third incorrect approach would be to confront the fellow cadet directly and attempt to resolve the issue informally. While direct communication can be valuable in many situations, academic misconduct is a serious offense that requires formal investigation by university authorities. An informal confrontation may not be effective, could escalate the situation negatively, and bypasses the university's established disciplinary procedures, which are designed to ensure fairness and due process for all parties involved. Professionals in maritime education and practice are expected to act with integrity and adhere to established rules and regulations. When faced with a situation involving potential misconduct, the professional decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the relevant university regulations and ethical guidelines concerning academic integrity and reporting procedures. 2. Assessing the nature and severity of the observed misconduct. 3. Determining the appropriate authority within the university to report the incident to. 4. Following the prescribed reporting procedures accurately and promptly. 5. Maintaining confidentiality as required by the university's policies. Question 6. Process analysis reveals that Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University is considering a new initiative to share anonymized student academic performance data with international maritime organizations to improve global maritime education standards. However, the university's current data handling practices have not been formally reviewed against the specific requirements of the Russian Federation's Federal Law No. 152 FZ on personal data. Which of the following approaches best ensures regulatory compliance and ethical data stewardship in this situation? Option A. Delegate the responsibility of ensuring data privacy to the departments that will be involved in the data sharing initiative. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the university's data protection policies and procedures to ensure full compliance with Federal Law No. 152 FZ on personal data before any data is shared, and obtain explicit consent where necessary. Option C. Proceed with data sharing after anonymizing the data, assuming international organizations adhere to similar privacy standards. Option D. Share the data with international organizations and rely on their internal data protection policies to manage the information responsibly. The correct answer is C. Proceed with data sharing after anonymizing the data, assuming international organizations adhere to similar privacy standards. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to the ethical and regulatory obligations of a maritime university in managing sensitive student data. The challenge lies in balancing the university's need to maintain accurate student records with the imperative to protect personal information from unauthorized access or disclosure, especially in the context of international student mobility and potential data privacy regulations. The university must navigate the complexities of data handling, consent, and security protocols to ensure compliance and maintain trust. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the university's existing data protection policies against the requirements of the Russian Federation's Federal Law No. 152 FZ on personal data. This law mandates specific procedures for the collection, processing, storage, and transfer of personal data, including obtaining explicit consent from individuals, ensuring data security, and limiting data usage to stated purposes. By aligning internal practices with this federal law, the university demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and the ethical treatment of student information, thereby safeguarding against legal repercussions and reputational damage. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that prioritizes immediate data sharing without verifying consent or compliance with Federal Law No. 152 FZ is a direct violation of the law. This failure to obtain explicit consent and ensure data security constitutes a breach of privacy and can lead to significant penalties under Russian legislation. An approach that relies solely on general international data protection principles without specific reference to the applicable Russian federal law is insufficient. While international principles are valuable, they do not supersede domestic legal requirements. Failure to adhere to the specific mandates of Federal Law No. 152 FZ means the university is not meeting its legal obligations within its jurisdiction. An approach that delegates data management responsibilities to individual departments without establishing a centralized, compliant framework is also problematic. This can lead to inconsistent application of data protection measures, increased risk of breaches, and difficulty in ensuring overall compliance with Federal Law No. 152 FZ. It undermines the university's ability to demonstrate a systematic and legally sound approach to data handling. Professional reasoning. Professionals in educational institutions must adopt a proactive and compliance-driven approach to data management. This involves 1. Understanding the specific legal framework governing data protection within their jurisdiction, in this case, the Russian Federation's Federal Law No. 152 FZ. 2. Developing and implementing clear documented policies and procedures that align with these legal requirements. 3. Ensuring all staff are adequately trained on data protection protocols. 4. Regularly reviewing and updating practices to reflect changes in legislation or best practices. 5. Establishing mechanisms for obtaining and managing consent, ensuring data security, and responding to data subject requests. This systematic approach ensures both legal compliance and ethical data stewardship. Question 7. Process analysis reveals that during the loading of a containerized shipment at port, a stevedore notices an unusual discoloration and a faint, acrid odor emanating from one of the packages. The stevedore is aware that the manifest indicates general cargo, but the observed anomaly is concerning. What is the most appropriate and regulatory compliant course of action for the stevedore to take immediately? Option A. Assume the discoloration and odor are due to minor damage or environmental exposure and proceed with loading, documenting the observation as a minor note in the loading report. Option B. Continue loading the container but instruct the crew to be extra vigilant and to report any further issues during the voyage. Option C. Halt all loading operations for that specific container and immediately report the observation to the ship's chief officer and the port's safety officer, initiating the established emergency reporting procedure for suspected hazardous materials. Option D. Discreetly inform the stevedore foreman to see if they have encountered similar issues before, and to decide on a course of action without involving higher authorities. Correct answer is C. Halt all loading operations for that specific container and immediately report the observation to the ship's chief officer and the port's safety officer, initiating the established emergency reporting procedure for suspected hazardous materials. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to the ethical and regulatory obligations of a maritime professional when encountering potentially hazardous cargo. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency and cargo movement with the paramount importance of safety and compliance with international and national maritime regulations. Misjudging the situation or prioritizing expediency over thoroughness can lead to severe consequences, including environmental damage, loss of life, and significant legal and financial penalties for the individual and the shipping company. Professional must exercise sound judgment, adhere strictly to established protocols, and demonstrate a commitment to the highest safety standards. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately halting operations and initiating a formal reporting procedure as mandated by maritime safety regulations. This approach is correct because it prioritizes safety and compliance above all else. The International Maritime Dangerous Goods (IMG) Code, which is a globally recognized standard and likely incorporated into the regulatory framework of Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University's entrance exam, mandates strict procedures for handling suspected dangerous goods. This includes immediate cessation of loading/unloading, isolation of the area, and notification of the designated authorities and the vessel's master. This systematic approach ensures that any potential hazard is assessed by trained personnel and managed according to established safety protocols, thereby preventing accidents and protecting human life and the environment. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with the operation after a visual anomaly is observed without further investigation, represents a failure to adhere to the precautionary principle inherent in maritime safety regulations. This approach ignores the potential for unseen dangers and prioritizes speed over safety, directly violating the spirit and letter of regulations designed to prevent catastrophic incidents. Attempting to resolve the issue informally by consulting with the stevedore foreman without involving the ship's officers or relevant safety personnel is also a regulatory failure. Maritime safety is a hierarchical responsibility. Bypassing the chain of command and designated safety officers undermines established protocols and can lead to miscommunication or inadequate risk assessment. The responsibility for cargo safety ultimately rests with the ship's command and the designated safety officers. Ignoring the anomaly altogether and assuming it is a minor cosmetic issue is the most egregious failure. This approach demonstrates a severe lack of professional diligence and a disregard for safety, directly contravening the fundamental duty of care expected of all maritime professionals. Such negligence can have devastating consequences and would undoubtedly lead to severe disciplinary and legal repercussions. Professional reasoning. Professionals in the maritime industry must adopt a proactive and risk-averse approach to safety. When encountering any deviation from expected norms, especially concerning cargo, the decision-making process should follow a clear hierarchy. 1. Immediate cessation of the activity. 2. Secure the area and prevent further exposure. 3. Initiate formal reporting procedures according to company and regulatory guidelines. 4. Consult with designated safety officers and the vessel's command. 5. Await expert assessment and clearance before resuming operations. This structured approach ensures that all potential risks are identified, assessed, and mitigated in accordance with established safety standards and legal requirements. Question 8. Process analysis reveals a situation where a vessel is scheduled for departure with a consignment of dangerous goods. The chief officer reports that, while the dangerous goods declaration appears complete, there is a slight ambiguity in the classification of one particular substance, and the packaging for another item seems less robust than typically observed for such materials. The master is under pressure to depart on schedule to meet a tight delivery deadline. Considering the regulatory framework governing maritime safety and the carriage of dangerous goods, what is the most appropriate course of action for the master? Option A. Instruct the chief officer to relabel the ambiguous cargo and to reinforce the packaging of the questionable item himself before departure, without further external verification. Option B. Depart as scheduled but instruct the crew to monitor the ambiguous cargo and the questionable packaging closely throughout the voyage. Option C. Proceed with departure as scheduled, assuming the shipper has provided accurate information and the packaging is adequate, to avoid delaying the vessel and incurring penalties for late arrival. Option D. Delay departure until the ambiguity in the classification of the substance is clarified by the shipper or a recognized expert, and the packaging of the questionable item is inspected and confirmed to meet IMG code standards. The correct answer is C. Proceed with departure as scheduled, assuming the shipper has provided accurate information and the packaging is adequate, to avoid delaying the vessel and incurring penalties for late arrival. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving the interpretation and application of maritime safety regulations, specifically concerning the carriage of dangerous goods. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate operational need to depart with the absolute requirement to comply with stringent safety protocols designed to prevent catastrophic incidents. Misinterpreting or circumventing these regulations, even with perceived operational urgency, can lead to severe consequences, including environmental damage, loss of life, and significant legal and financial penalties for the vessel, its owners, and the crew. The responsibility of the master to ensure compliance is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the International Maritime Dangerous Goods (IMG) code, specifically focusing on the classification, packaging, labeling, and documentation requirements for the specific cargo in question. This includes verifying that all documentation, such as the dangerous goods declaration and the stowage plan, accurately reflects the cargo's properties and is in compliance with Chapter Roman 7 of the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, SOLAS. The master must ensure that the cargo is properly stowed and secured according to IMG code recommendations and SOLAS requirements to prevent shifting or damage during the voyage. If any discrepancies or non-compliance are identified, the master must rectify them before departure, even if it causes a delay. This adherence to the IMG code and SOLAS is mandated by Russian Federation maritime law, which incorporates these international conventions into its national regulatory framework for vessel operations. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that prioritizes departure without ensuring full compliance with IMG code and SOLAS requirements for dangerous goods is fundamentally flawed. This would constitute a direct violation of the master's responsibilities under Russian Federation maritime law and international conventions. Such an approach risks the safety of the vessel, crew, and environment, and would expose all parties to severe legal repercussions. An approach that relies solely on the shipper's declaration without independent verification of the cargo's classification, packaging, and labeling, especially when there are doubts or unusual circumstances, is also incorrect. While the shipper is responsible for providing accurate information, the master has the ultimate responsibility for the safe carriage of the cargo. Failure to verify can lead to misdeclaration and improper handling, leading to dangerous situations. An approach that seeks to bypass or find loopholes in the regulations due to time pressure is a serious ethical and legal failure. Maritime safety regulations are not suggestions, but mandatory requirements designed to prevent accidents. Any attempt to circumvent them, regardless of the perceived operational necessity, undermines the entire safety regime and is unacceptable. Professional reasoning. Professionals in maritime operations must adopt a risk-based approach that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance above all else. When faced with potential non-compliance, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the specific regulation or requirement in question. 2. Assessing the potential risks associated with noncompliance. 3. Consulting relevant documentation and seeking clarification if necessary. 4. Implementing corrective actions to ensure full compliance. 5. Documenting all decisions and actions taken. In situations involving dangerous goods, the IMG code and SOLAs are the primary reference points, and their strict adherence is non-negotiable. Question 9. Process analysis reveals that a prospective candidate for the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University entrance examination possesses a diploma from a recognized maritime training institution in a neighboring CIS country. The candidate is seeking clarification on whether this prior education exempts them from specific entrance examination subjects. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework for the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University entrance exam? Option A. Advise the candidate based on a general understanding of mutual recognition of maritime qualifications within the CIS region, assuming their diploma will be accepted. Option B. Suggest to the candidate that their diploma is likely sufficient for exemption, as most CIS countries have similar educational standards in maritime fields. Option C. Consult the official regulatory framework and specific guidelines of the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University entrance exam to determine the exact provisions for recognizing prior maritime education and potential exemptions. Option D. Recommend that the candidate contact the training institution in the neighboring CIS country to inquire about their diploma's equivalency for Russian Maritime University entrance exams. The correct answer is A. Advise the candidate based on a general understanding of mutual recognition of maritime qualifications within the CIS region, assuming their diploma will be accepted. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to the ethical and regulatory obligations of a maritime professional in the context of an entrance examination for Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University. The core difficulty lies in balancing the integrity of the examination process with the need to provide accurate and compliant information to prospective students. Misinterpreting or misapplying the university's specific entrance examination regulations could lead to misleading advice, potentially jeopardizing a candidate's application or the university's admission standards. The professional must exercise careful judgment to ensure all actions align with the established framework. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough and precise understanding of the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University's entrance examination regulations, specifically concerning the eligibility criteria for candidates with prior maritime education. This approach prioritizes adherence to the explicit rules and guidelines set forth by the university. By consulting the official regulatory framework, the professional ensures that any advice provided is factually accurate and compliant, thereby upholding the integrity of the admission process and acting ethically towards the candidate. This aligns with the principle of regulatory compliance, which mandates strict adherence to established legal and institutional rules. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that relies on general knowledge of maritime education eligibility without referencing the specific Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University entrance examination regulations is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of adherence to the specific jurisdiction's rules, potentially leading to incorrect assumptions about equivalency or recognition of prior learning. Another incorrect approach would be to interpret the regulations in a manner that favors the candidate's perceived qualifications without explicit justification within the university's framework. This demonstrates a failure to apply the regulations objectively and could be seen as a breach of ethical conduct by attempting to circumvent established procedures, potentially compromising the fairness of the admission process. An approach that prioritizes expediency over accuracy by providing a quick but potentially inaccurate answer based on assumptions also represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This demonstrates a disregard for the importance of precise information in an official examination context and could lead to serious consequences for both the candidate and the university. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this context must adopt a systematic decision-making process. First, they must identify the specific regulatory framework governing the situation in this case. The Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University entrance exam regulations. Second, they must meticulously analyze the candidate's situation against the explicit requirements of these regulations. Third, they must consult official documentation or seek clarification from the relevant university authority if any ambiguity exists. Finally, they must communicate their findings or advice clearly and accurately, ensuring it is directly supported by the established regulatory framework. This structured approach ensures both compliance and ethical conduct. Question 10. Stakeholder feedback indicates a concern regarding the grading of a specific student's examination in a core maritime law subject. The feedback, originating from a maritime industry representative who has a vested interest in the student's success, suggests that the student's performance was unfairly assessed and that the grade does not reflect their actual knowledge. As the faculty member responsible for the examination, what is the most appropriate course of action? Strictly adhering to the regulatory framework and guidelines for the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University entrance exam. Option A. Immediately adjust the student's grade upwards to satisfy the external stakeholders' request, as their industry perspective is valuable and the student's success is important for future professional placements. Option B. Discuss the feedback informally with a few trusted colleagues to gauge their opinion on the student's general performance, and then make a decision based on that consensus, without formally documenting the process. Option C. Politely dismiss the feedback from the industry representative, stating that the faculty member's assessment is final and that no external input is considered in grading decisions. Option D. Conduct an independent and objective review of the student's examination script and the marking scheme, referencing the university's official examination regulations and internal assessment policies to determine if any discrepancies or errors occurred, and then communicate the findings through the appropriate university channels. The correct answer is D. Conduct an independent and objective review of the student's examination script and the marking scheme, referencing the university's official examination regulations and internal assessment policies to determine if any discrepancies or errors occurred, and then communicate the findings through the appropriate university channels. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires navigating the complex interplay between academic integrity, the university's reputation, and the ethical obligations of faculty members. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need to uphold rigorous academic standards with the potential for external pressures or misinterpretations of performance. A faculty member must exercise sound judgment to ensure that all assessment processes are fair, transparent, and in strict adherence to the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University's established examination regulations and internal guidelines. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective review of the examination materials and the student's performance, strictly adhering to the university's documented procedures for assessment and appeals. This approach is correct because it prioritizes fairness and due process, ensuring that any decision regarding the student's grade is based on verifiable evidence and established academic criteria. It aligns with the university's commitment to academic integrity, which is a cornerstone of its reputation and the value of its degrees. By following established protocols, the faculty member demonstrates professionalism and upholds the trust placed in them by students, colleagues, and the institution. This also ensures compliance with the internal regulations governing examinations at Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University, which likely detail procedures for grading, review, and dispute resolution. An incorrect approach that involves immediately acceding to the external request without independent verification would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for established university procedures and a potential compromise of academic standards. It suggests a susceptibility to undue influence, which undermines the faculty member's objectivity and the integrity of the examination process. Such an action could lead to unfair grading and damage the university's reputation for academic rigor. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the feedback outright without any form of review, is also professionally unsound. The faculty member is the primary assessor. A complete refusal to consider feedback, even if it appears to be from an external source, can be perceived as dismissive and may overlook potential genuine concerns or errors. This approach fails to demonstrate a commitment to continuous improvement and can create an adversarial relationship with stakeholders, potentially impacting the university's broader engagement. It also risks overlooking a genuine procedural irregularity that might have occurred, even if the feedback is poorly phrased. A third incorrect approach, which is to consult with colleagues informally without following the university's formal appeal or review process, is also problematic. While collegial discussion can be valuable, relying solely on informal consultations bypasses the established, documented procedures designed to ensure fairness and consistency. This can lead to inconsistent application of standards and may not provide the necessary formal record for any subsequent official review. It also fails to engage the appropriate university bodies responsible for overseeing academic standards and examination integrity. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Acknowledging the feedback received. 2. Consulting the specific regulations and guidelines of Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University pertaining to examinations, grading, and student appeals. 3. Conducting an objective and thorough review of the student's examination performance against the established marking criteria. 4. If necessary, initiating the formal university process for reviewing assessment outcomes or addressing stakeholder concerns. 5. Documenting all steps taken and decisions made. Question 11. The audit findings indicate that a specific section of the entrance examination for the Faculty of Navigation at Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University has been consistently administered with a slightly modified question format compared to the officially published syllabus. A deviation attributed to the examination committee's interpretation of what best assesses practical aptitude. Which of the following actions is the most appropriate regulatory compliance response? Option A. Issue a directive to all invigilators to revert to the exact question format as published in the syllabus for all future examinations, without further investigation into the rationale behind the deviation or its potential impact. Option B. Acknowledge the audit findings, but consider the deviation a minor procedural matter that does not warrant significant intervention, given the perceived effectiveness of the modified questions in assessing aptitude. Option C. Consult with maritime university admissions officers from other countries to understand their approaches to similar assessment challenges and adapt their methodologies to the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University context. Option D. Immediately convene a meeting of the examination committee and relevant academic leadership to review the audit findings against the university's admission regulations and the Ministry of Transport's guidelines for maritime education. And if a discrepancy is confirmed, initiate a formal process to rectify the examination materials and procedures for future admissions, while also assessing the impact on past admissions. The correct answer is D. Immediately convene a meeting of the examination committee and relevant academic leadership to review the audit findings against the university's admission regulations and the Ministry of Transport's guidelines for maritime education. And if a discrepancy is confirmed, initiate a formal process to rectify the examination materials and procedures for future admissions, while also assessing the impact on past admissions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between operational expediency and strict adherence to regulatory requirements for maritime university entrance exams. The audit findings highlight a potential deviation from established procedures, necessitating a careful assessment of the appropriate response to ensure compliance and maintain the integrity of the admission process. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need to address the identified issue promptly with the imperative to act within the defined legal and regulatory framework of Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the specific regulations governing the entrance examination process at Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University. This includes consulting the university's internal statutes, admission policies, and any relevant federal or ministerial decrees pertaining to higher education and maritime training in the Russian Federation. The objective is to ascertain whether the observed practice constitutes a violation, and if so, to determine the prescribed corrective actions. This approach is correct because it prioritizes regulatory compliance, which is paramount in any academic or professional setting, especially in a field like maritime education, where safety and adherence to standards are critical. Acting based on a direct interpretation of the university's own established rules and relevant national legislation ensures that any remediation is legally sound and ethically defensible, safeguarding the university's reputation and the fairness of the admission process. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the audit findings without proper investigation, assuming the practice is acceptable due to its prevalence or perceived efficiency. This fails to acknowledge the authority and purpose of the audit and disregards the potential for systemic noncompliance, which could lead to future legal challenges or reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to implement immediate, ad hoc corrective measures without consulting the relevant regulations or seeking guidance from the university's legal or administrative departments. This risks introducing new procedural errors or overstepping the authority of the individual or department responsible for the audit response, potentially creating further compliance issues. A third incorrect approach would be to seek external advice from sources not directly related to the regulatory framework of Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University or Russian maritime education, such as general best practices from unrelated institutions. This would be inappropriate, as it ignores the specific legal and institutional context governing the university's operations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly understand the audit findings and the specific context in which they arose. Second, identify and consult all relevant internal university policies, regulations, and external legal frameworks applicable to the situation. Third, if ambiguity exists, seek clarification from the appropriate university authorities or legal counsel. Fourth, develop and implement corrective actions that are directly aligned with the identified regulatory requirements and best practices within the specified jurisdiction. Finally, document all steps taken and ensure that the implemented changes are communicated to all relevant stakeholders. Question 12. Upon reviewing the operational procedures for a training vessel at Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University, a cadet observes a senior instructor consistently deviating from established safety protocols during practical navigation exercises, potentially endangering the vessel and its crew. The cadet is aware that reporting such a deviation could lead to negative repercussions from the instructor. What is the most appropriate course of action for the cadet to take in accordance with maritime safety regulations and university guidelines? Option A. Ignore the observed deviations to avoid potential conflict and personal repercussions, assuming the instructor knows best. Option B. Directly confront the senior instructor about their unsafe practices in front of other cadets to ensure immediate correction. Option C. Submit an anonymous tip to a maritime safety authority without first documenting the incident or informing the university. Option D. Document the observed deviations with specific details and report them through the official university channels for safety concerns, following the established reporting hierarchy. The correct answer is D. Document the observed deviations with specific details and report them through the official university channels for safety concerns, following the established reporting hierarchy. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge related to the ethical and regulatory obligations of a maritime professional concerning the reporting of potential safety violations. The core difficulty lies in balancing the duty to report with the potential personal repercussions and the need for accurate, verifiable information. Careful judgment is required to ensure that reporting is done responsibly and in accordance with established procedures, avoiding both negligence and unsubstantiated accusations. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of observation, verification, and reporting through official channels. This aligns with the principles of maritime safety regulations, which mandate the reporting of hazards and incidents to prevent future accidents. Specifically, adherence to the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea (SOLAS) and relevant national maritime legislation, as applicable within the Russian Federation's regulatory framework, which would be the primary jurisdiction for Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University, requires that crew members report any conditions or practices that compromise safety. This approach ensures that the report is factual, actionable, and processed through the appropriate safety management systems, thereby upholding professional integrity and contributing to a safer maritime environment. An incorrect approach of ignoring the observed issue due to fear of reprisal is a failure to uphold the professional duty of care and a violation of safety reporting regulations. This negligence could lead to a serious incident, making the individual complicit in any subsequent harm. Another incorrect approach, that of immediately and informally confronting the senior officer without prior documentation or consideration of the chain of command, risks escalating the situation without a clear resolution and may not be an effective reporting mechanism. It could also be perceived as insubordination, depending on the context and the university's internal regulations. A third incorrect approach, that of anonymously reporting the issue without any attempt at verification or formal documentation, undermines the credibility of the report and may not provide sufficient information for investigation, thus failing to meet the standards of responsible reporting. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve, first, meticulously documenting the observed facts, including dates, times, specific details of the observed practice, and any potential consequences. Second, consulting relevant university regulations, safety manuals, and maritime laws to understand the proper reporting procedures. Third, considering the most appropriate and effective channel for reporting, which typically involves escalating through the established chain of command or reporting to the designated safety officer or department, depending on the university's internal policies. Finally, ensuring that the report is factual, objective, and submitted through official, traceable means. Question 13. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a less stringent but cheaper maintenance schedule for the university's training vessels could result in significant annual savings. However, this proposed schedule deviates from the recommended maintenance intervals outlined in the university's internal safety manual, which is based on the requirements of the Russian Federation's maritime regulations. The analysis highlights the financial benefits, but does not fully quantify the potential increase in operational risks or the impact on the training program's adherence to safety standards, which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical obligations of Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University. Option A. Postpone all non-essential maintenance, including the proposed schedule changes, until a future budget cycle allows for a more comprehensive review and potential upgrades. Option B. Proceed with the cheaper maintenance schedule, assuming that minor deviations from recommended intervals will not pose a substantial risk to the training program or vessel safety. Option C. Prioritize adherence to the University Safety Manual and Russian Federation maritime regulations, seeking alternative funding or phased implementation of necessary upgrades if budget constraints are a significant barrier to full compliance. Option D. Implement the cheaper maintenance schedule to realize immediate cost savings, while informally monitoring for any obvious issues. The correct answer is D. Implement the cheaper maintenance schedule to realize immediate cost savings, while informally monitoring for any obvious issues. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency and cost savings against stringent safety regulations and the ethical imperative to protect human life and the marine environment. The university's entrance exam, as per its regulatory framework, emphasizes adherence to maritime safety standards and responsible decision-making in complex situations. A cost-benefit analysis, while a common business tool, must be applied within the strict confines of maritime law and university policy, which prioritize safety above all else. The correct approach involves prioritizing compliance with the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University's established safety protocols and relevant Russian Federation maritime regulations concerning vessel maintenance and crew welfare. This approach is right because it directly upholds the university's commitment to producing competent and safety-conscious maritime professionals. Specifically, Russian Federation maritime law, such as the Merchant Shipping Code, mandates certain standards for vessel seaworthiness and crew working conditions, which cannot be overridden by a cost-benefit calculation that suggests a less safe alternative. The ethical duty of care for both the crew and the integrity of the training program necessitates adherence to these regulations, ensuring that the university's reputation and the safety of its students and future passengers are not compromised. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cost savings identified in the analysis, without adequately assessing the regulatory compliance and safety implications, fails to meet the professional standards expected of maritime institutions. This would represent a significant regulatory failure by potentially violating the Merchant Shipping Code of the Russian Federation, which outlines requirements for vessel maintenance and operational safety. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the well-being of students and crew, prioritizing financial gain over human safety and the educational mission. Another incorrect approach that suggests deferring the necessary safety upgrades due to budget constraints, without a clear plan for immediate rectification and regulatory approval, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of proactive risk management and a failure to adhere to the principle of continuous improvement in safety. It could lead to a situation where the vessel becomes non-compliant, posing a direct risk and potentially leading to severe penalties or operational shutdowns, undermining the university's core function. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a thorough review of all applicable regulations, a comprehensive risk assessment that quantifies potential safety hazards and their consequences, and consultation with relevant safety officers and legal counsel. The decision must be grounded in regulatory compliance and ethical responsibility, ensuring that any proposed solution, even if it involves costs, aligns with the highest safety standards and the university's educational objectives. Question 14. The assessment process reveals that an applicant for the Faculty of Navigation has a strong overall grade point average, GPA, from a non-maritime related bachelor's degree program, but their transcript shows limited specific coursework in physics, mathematics, or any subjects directly related to navigation or engineering principles. What is the most appropriate regulatory compliant approach for the admissions committee to take? Option A. Admit the applicant based on their high overall GPA, assuming their academic aptitude will allow them to catch up on any necessary maritime-specific knowledge during their studies. Option B. Offer the applicant a place in a general maritime studies foundation year program that covers all basic subjects, regardless of their prior academic background. Option C. Conduct a detailed review of the applicant's transcript to identify any transferable skills or foundational knowledge in mathematics and physics, and if significant gaps are identified, require the applicant to pass a specific maritime-focused entrance examination or complete a targeted preparatory module before admission. Option D. Reject the applicant outright due to the lack of directly relevant coursework, as this indicates insufficient foundational preparation for a specialized maritime program. The correct answer is A. Admit the applicant based on their high overall GPA, assuming their academic aptitude will allow them to catch up on any necessary maritime-specific knowledge during their studies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in maritime education where an applicant's prior academic record, while potentially indicative of academic ability, may not fully align with the specific demands and foundational knowledge required for a specialized maritime program at Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University. The challenge lies in balancing the university's commitment to admitting qualified candidates with the need to ensure all students possess the necessary prerequisites for success in a rigorous, safety-critical field. A purely academic assessment might overlook practical aptitude or specific maritime knowledge gaps, while an overly lenient approach could compromise the program's integrity and the future competence of its graduates. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review that goes beyond mere grade point averages. It necessitates an evaluation of the applicant's academic transcripts to identify specific courses relevant to maritime studies, such as physics, mathematics, and potentially introductory engineering or navigation principles. Crucially, this approach requires the university to assess whether the applicant's prior learning, as demonstrated by their academic record, adequately covers the foundational knowledge expected for entry into the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University's programs. If gaps are identified, the university must then consider supplementary assessments or preparatory courses to bridge these deficiencies, ensuring the applicant can meet the program's specific academic and practical requirements. This aligns with the university's responsibility to maintain academic standards and prepare graduates for the demanding realities of the maritime profession, as implicitly governed by the university's internal regulations and the broader framework of maritime education standards. Incorrect approach is analysis. Admitting the applicant solely based on a high overall GPA without scrutinizing the relevance of their previous coursework to maritime studies is an incorrect approach. This fails to acknowledge that a strong GPA in unrelated fields does not guarantee preparedness for the specialized technical and theoretical demands of maritime education. Risks admitting students who may struggle with core concepts, potentially impacting their learning and the overall academic environment. Rejecting the applicant solely based on a slightly lower GPA, even if their previous coursework included relevant subjects, is also an incorrect approach. This overlooks the possibility that the applicant may possess a strong understanding of critical maritime-related subjects, and that a lower GPA might be due to factors unrelated to their aptitude for maritime studies. It represents an overly rigid application of a single metric and fails to consider the holistic profile of the applicant. requiring the applicant to immediately enroll in a full-year preparatory program without first assessing their existing knowledge and identifying specific areas of deficiency, is an inefficient and potentially unnecessary approach. While preparatory programs can be beneficial, a targeted assessment should precede such a broad requirement, ensuring that the applicant's time and resources are used effectively to address actual knowledge gaps. This approach lacks the nuanced judgment required to tailor the admissions process to individual applicant profiles. Professional reasoning. Professionals in university admissions, particularly for specialized institutions like Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University, must adopt a balanced and evidence-based decision-making process. This involves 1. Understanding the specific academic and practical prerequisites for each program. 2. Thoroughly reviewing all submitted documentation, including transcripts, to assess the relevance and depth of prior learning. 3. Employing a combination of quantitative GPA, course grades, and qualitative course content descriptions analysis. 4. Identifying specific knowledge gaps or areas of concern. 5. Developing a clear and justifiable plan to address any identified deficiencies, which may include supplementary assessments, interviews, or preparatory course work. 6. Ensuring that the final decision is consistent with the university's admission policies and the overarching goals of producing competent maritime professionals. Question 15. Examination of the data shows a discrepancy between the officially approved syllabus for the maritime law and regulations subject and the content presented in the publicly accessible practice questions for the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University entrance exam. The discrepancy involves a specific section on cargo manifest requirements that appears to be outdated in the practice questions compared to the current syllabus. Which of the following is the most appropriate course of action to ensure regulatory compliance and fairness for all candidates? Option A. Proceed with the examination as scheduled, assuming candidates will identify and correct such minor discrepancies themselves during their preparation. Option B. Advise candidates directly via unofficial social media channels to disregard the practice questions on cargo manifest requirements and refer only to the syllabus. Option C. Immediately publish a revised set of practice questions online, reflecting the current syllabus, without further internal consultation. Option D. Formally document the discrepancy, compare it against the official syllabus and relevant maritime regulations, and report it to the university's entrance examination committee for their review and directive. The correct answer is C. Immediately publish a revised set of practice questions online, reflecting the current syllabus, without further internal consultation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the need for timely information dissemination and the strict adherence to regulatory disclosure requirements. A maritime university's entrance exam, particularly one focused on regulatory compliance, demands absolute precision in interpreting and applying the governing framework. The challenge lies in identifying the correct procedural pathway for addressing potential discrepancies in published examination materials, ensuring that any corrective actions align with the established rules of the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University's entrance examination process. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of internal review and official communication. This entails first verifying the discrepancy through a thorough comparison of the original source materials and the published examination content. Subsequently, the discrepancy must be formally reported to the designated examination oversight body or committee within the university, following the established internal procedures for handling such issues. This ensures that any necessary amendments or clarifications are issued through the official channels, maintaining the integrity and fairness of the examination process for all candidates. This aligns with the principles of transparency and due process inherent in any formal examination, as mandated by the university's internal regulations for entrance examinations. An incorrect approach would be to unilaterally issue a correction without proper authorization, or to ignore the discrepancy altogether. Unilaterally issuing a correction bypasses the established governance structure for the entrance examination, potentially leading to inconsistent or unauthorized information being disseminated, which violates the principle of centralized control and official communication. Ignoring the discrepancy, on the other hand, directly undermines the fairness and accuracy of the examination, potentially disadvantaging candidates who rely on the published materials and failing to uphold the university's commitment to a rigorous and equitable assessment. Both actions demonstrate a disregard for the established regulatory framework governing the university's entrance examinations. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established procedures, clear communication, and the preservation of examination integrity. This involves understanding the specific rules and guidelines of the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University's entrance examination, identifying the appropriate authority for reporting and resolving discrepancies, and acting with diligence and transparency throughout the process. Question 16. Assessment of the appropriate response by an academic supervisor at Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University when a student's final project submission contains passages that closely resemble published academic literature, raising concerns about potential plagiarism, and the supervisor is aware of the university's strict policy on academic integrity. Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the student's submission, comparing it against the suspected sources, and consulting the university's official academic integrity policy and procedures before taking any further action. Option B. Ask the student to rewrite the suspect sections without formally investigating the plagiarism concern. Option C. Ignore the similarities to avoid a potentially difficult conversation with the student and maintain a positive working relationship. Option D. Immediately report the student for academic misconduct and recommend severe penalties based on the initial suspicion. The correct answer is D. Immediately report the student for academic misconduct and recommend severe penalties based on the initial suspicion. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire to present their work accurately and the university's established procedures for academic integrity. The challenge lies in navigating these procedures while ensuring fairness and upholding the principles of academic honesty. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for thoroughness in academic assessment with the student's right to have their work evaluated fairly and without undue prejudice. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the student's submitted work against the university's established academic integrity policy, specifically focusing on the definitions and procedures related to plagiarism and academic misconduct. This approach is professionally sound because it adheres strictly to the regulatory framework of Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University. It prioritizes a systematic and evidence-based evaluation, ensuring that any disciplinary action is taken only after a clear violation of the university's rules has been identified and documented according to established protocols. This upholds the principle of due process for the student and maintains the integrity of the academic assessment process. An incorrect approach that involves immediately dismissing the student's work based on a suspicion of plagiarism without a formal investigation fails to follow the university's established procedures. This bypasses the required steps for evidence gathering and student response, potentially leading to an unfair outcome and violating the student's right to a fair hearing. Another incorrect approach, which is to overlook the potential plagiarism to avoid conflict or administrative burden, compromises academic integrity. This undermines the university's commitment to honest scholarship and sets a dangerous precedent, devaluing the efforts of students who adhere to academic standards. Finally, an approach that involves imposing a penalty without consulting the university's academic misconduct guidelines or seeking guidance from the relevant academic integrity committee is unprofessional and likely to be procedurally flawed. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of the university's regulatory framework and can lead to inconsistent and unjust application of its policies. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve, first, recognizing the potential issue and its implications for academic integrity. Second, consulting the relevant university regulations and policies, in this case, Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University's academic integrity framework. Third, initiating the formal investigation process as outlined in those regulations, which typically includes gathering evidence, informing the student, and providing an opportunity for the student to respond. And fourth, making a decision based on the evidence and in accordance with the established procedures and penalties. Question 17. Which approach would be most appropriate for a cadet facing an offer of unauthorized assistance from a senior officer during the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University entrance examination, in strict adherence to the university's regulatory framework and ethical guidelines? Option A. Ignore the offer and proceed with the examination, hoping the senior officer does not follow through with their offer. Option B. Directly confront the senior officer. Firmly refuse the offer and express disapproval of their actions. Option C. Accept the offer of assistance to ensure a good score, assuming the senior officer's influence will protect against repercussions. Option D. Politely decline the offer of assistance and immediately report the incident, along with the nature of the offer, to the supervising professor or the examination committee. Correct answer is D. Politely decline the offer of assistance and immediately report the incident, along with the nature of the offer, to the supervising professor or the examination committee. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a cadet to navigate conflicting directives and potential ethical compromises while upholding the integrity of academic assessment and the university's reputation. The pressure to achieve a good result, coupled with the perceived authority of a senior officer, creates a complex situation where a cadet must prioritize regulatory compliance and ethical conduct over personal gain or appeasement. The correct approach involves a cadet seeking clarification and guidance from the appropriate academic authority within the university, specifically the professor or department responsible for the entrance exam. This approach is correct because it adheres to the established regulatory framework for academic integrity and assessment at Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University. The university's internal regulations and examination guidelines would mandate that all candidates are assessed on their own merit, and that any form of academic dishonesty is prohibited. By reporting the offer of assistance and seeking guidance, the cadet is acting in accordance with these regulations, demonstrating honesty, integrity, and respect for the examination process. This also aligns with the ethical principles of fair competition and equal opportunity for all candidates. An incorrect approach would be to accept the offer of assistance. This is a direct violation of academic integrity regulations, which would likely be detailed in the university's charter and student conduct policies. Accepting such help constitutes cheating, undermining the validity of the entrance exam, and devaluing the achievements of honest candidates. It also exposes the cadet to severe disciplinary action, including disqualification from the exam and potential expulsion. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the offer and proceed with the exam without reporting it. While this might seem like a way to avoid direct complicity, it still fails to uphold the principles of academic integrity. By not reporting a potential breach of regulations, the cadet implicitly allows for the possibility of unfair advantage, which is contrary to the spirit of fair assessment. This inaction could be viewed as a failure to report misconduct, a breach of professional responsibility expected of future maritime officers. A further incorrect approach would be to confront the senior officer directly and refuse the offer in an aggressive manner. While refusing the offer is correct, the method of refusal is crucial. An aggressive confrontation could escalate the situation unnecessarily and might not be the most effective way to resolve the issue within the university's established reporting structures. It bypasses the proper channels for addressing academic integrity concerns and could lead to interpersonal conflict without resolving the underlying regulatory issue. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a clear understanding of the relevant university regulations and ethical codes. Cadets should be trained to identify potential breaches of academic integrity and to know the established procedures for reporting such incidents. The primary steps involve: 1. Recognizing the problematic situation and its potential consequences. 2. Prioritizing adherence to academic regulations and ethical principles. 3. Seeking guidance from the appropriate academic authority, e.g., professor, examination board. 4. Documenting the incident if necessary. 5. Acting with integrity and transparency throughout the process. Question 18. Implementation of a new entrance examination for the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University requires the development of questions assessing candidates' understanding of maritime regulatory compliance. Which of the following methods for sourcing and verifying the content of these regulatory questions is most appropriate to ensure strict adherence to the exam's jurisdictional requirements and current legal standards? Option A. Utilizing summaries and case studies found in popular maritime industry publications and online forums. Option B. Referencing older editions of Russian maritime legislation that have been previously used in similar examinations. Option C. Consulting the most recent official publications of the Maritime Code of the Russian Federation and relevant federal laws, alongside university-specific entrance exam guidelines. Option D. Reviewing general international maritime conventions and widely accepted academic interpretations of maritime law. The correct answer is D. Reviewing general international maritime conventions and widely accepted academic interpretations of maritime law. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in maritime education, ensuring that entrance examination materials, specifically those related to regulatory compliance, are current and accurately reflect the applicable legal framework. The professional challenge lies in the potential for outdated or misapplied regulations to mislead prospective students, undermining the integrity of the entrance process and potentially impacting their future understanding of maritime law and safety. The university has a duty to uphold the highest standards of accuracy and relevance in its examination content. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the most recent official publications of the relevant maritime regulatory bodies governing the Russian Federation, specifically those applicable to the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University's entrance examinations. This includes consulting the latest versions of the Maritime Code of the Russian Federation, relevant federal laws concerning education and maritime transport, and any specific internal regulations or guidelines issued by the university for its entrance exams. The justification for this approach is rooted in the principle of regulatory compliance, ensuring that all examination content is legally sound, up-to-date, and directly applicable to the educational and professional context of future maritime specialists. Adherence to these official sources guarantees that the examination accurately assesses a candidate's knowledge of the current legal landscape they will operate within. Incorrect approaches analysis. Relying on general maritime law principles without specific reference to Russian Federation regulations is an incorrect approach. This fails to meet the strict jurisdictional requirement of the exam, which is tied to a specific Russian institution. Such an approach risks introducing irrelevant or conflicting legal standards, thereby failing to assess a candidate's preparedness for the specific legal environment of Russian maritime operations. Using outdated versions of the Maritime Code of the Russian Federation or other relevant laws is also an incorrect approach. Maritime regulations are subject to amendment and updates. Using obsolete information can lead to the assessment of knowledge that is no longer legally valid, creating a false impression of a candidate's understanding and potentially leading to their admission based on incorrect legal premises. Consulting unofficial summaries or interpretations of maritime law, even if widely circulated, is an incorrect approach. While these may offer insights, they do not carry the force of law and may contain inaccuracies or omissions. University's entrance exam must be based on authoritative legal text to ensure fairness and accuracy. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with developing entrance examinations must adopt a systematic and authoritative approach to regulatory content. This involves 1. Identifying the precise jurisdiction and scope of the examination. 2. Consulting only official, current legal and regulatory documents from the designated jurisdiction. 3. Cross-referencing information with multiple official sources where applicable. 4. Establishing a clear process for updating examination materials as regulations change. 5. Prioritizing accuracy and relevance above all else to ensure the integrity of the assessment process. Question 19. The efficiency study reveals that a new digital system could streamline the distribution of examination materials for the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University entrance exam, potentially reducing preparation time by 20%. However, the current university regulations mandate a specific, paper-based, sealed envelope distribution protocol for all entrance examinations, which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework for this entrance exam. Option A. Conduct a formal review of the existing regulations to determine if an amendment or waiver can be sought to incorporate the digital system, while continuing with the current paper-based protocol until official approval is granted. Option B. Proceed with the digital system on a trial basis for a subset of applicants, informing them that it is an experimental process. Option C. Implement the digital system immediately, as efficiency gains are clearly beneficial and the regulations are outdated. Option D. Delegate the decision to the examination invigilators, allowing them to choose between the paper-based method and the digital system based on their perceived efficiency on the day of the exam. Correct answer is C. Implement the digital system immediately, as efficiency gains are clearly beneficial and the regulations are outdated. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the pursuit of operational efficiency with strict adherence to the regulatory framework governing maritime education and training at Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University. The university's entrance exam regulations are paramount and must be followed without deviation, especially concerning the integrity of the examination process. The core of the challenge lies in interpreting and applying these regulations to a situation where a potential shortcut is identified, which could compromise the established procedures. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University entrance exam regulations to determine if any provision allows for the proposed deviation. If no such provision exists, the correct approach is to strictly adhere to the existing, approved examination procedures, even if they appear less efficient. This upholds the principle of regulatory compliance, ensuring the fairness and validity of the entrance examination, which is a fundamental ethical and legal obligation for any educational institution. The university's regulations are designed to ensure a standardized and equitable assessment for all prospective students, and any deviation, however minor it may seem, can undermine this objective and potentially lead to challenges regarding the legitimacy of the admissions process. An incorrect approach would be to implement the proposed efficiency measure without explicit authorization from the university's governing bodies or a clear interpretation of the existing regulations that permits it. This could involve bypassing established security protocols for question paper distribution or altering the standard invigilation procedures. Such actions would constitute a direct violation of the regulatory framework, potentially leading to disciplinary action, invalidation of exam results, and damage to the university's reputation. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that general principles of efficiency override specific university entrance exam regulations. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the hierarchical nature of rules and the importance of specific mandates in regulated environments like educational institutions. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the specific regulation or guideline in question. 2. Seeking clarification from the relevant authorities within the university if the regulation is ambiguous. 3. Evaluating any proposed change against the explicit requirements of the regulations. 4. Documenting the decision-making process and any approvals or rejections. 5. Prioritizing the integrity and fairness of the examination process above perceived operational efficiencies that are not explicitly permitted by the governing framework. Question 20. During the evaluation of the entrance examination process for the Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University, an applicant is concerned about the scope of the technical questions and wishes to understand the specific areas of maritime law that will be emphasized. Which of the following actions best demonstrates an understanding of regulatory compliance and professional conduct within the context of this university's entrance examination framework? Option A. Discussing potential exam topics with current students to gather informal insights into the types of questions asked in previous years. Option B. Contacting the university's admissions office to request official documentation or guidance regarding the examination syllabus and areas of focus. Option C. Searching for general maritime law syllabi from other maritime institutions online to infer the likely content. Option D. Reaching out to a professor in a related department who is not part of the examination committee to ask for their personal opinion on key topics. Correct answer is B. Contacting the university's admissions office to request official documentation or guidance regarding the examination syllabus and areas of focus. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to navigate the specific regulatory framework governing entrance examinations at Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University, particularly concerning the integrity and fairness of the assessment process. The applicant must demonstrate an understanding of how to uphold these standards while also recognizing the boundaries of acceptable inquiry. The correct approach involves seeking clarification directly from the examination committee or the designated academic department responsible for the entrance exams. This is the most appropriate professional response because it adheres strictly to the established procedures for addressing concerns or seeking information related to the examination. It respects the authority of the university's academic governance and ensures that any questions or potential issues are handled through official channels, thereby maintaining the integrity and fairness of the entrance examination process as mandated by the university's internal regulations and any overarching educational laws governing maritime universities in the Russian Federation. This method prioritizes transparency and adherence to protocol. An incorrect approach would be to attempt to obtain information about the exam content or structure from current students or alumni. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses official channels and could lead to an unfair advantage for the applicant, undermining the principle of equal opportunity for all candidates. Such actions could be construed as an attempt to gain unauthorized access to examination materials, violating academic integrity policies and potentially leading to disqualification. Another incorrect approach would be to directly contact faculty members, not officially designated, to handle entrance exam inquiries. While faculty members are part of the university, engaging them outside of the established examination committee structure for specific exam-related questions can create confusion, circumvent established protocols, and potentially lead to the dissemination of unofficial or inaccurate information. This approach fails to respect the defined administrative and academic processes for managing entrance examinations. A further incorrect approach would be to assume that general knowledge of maritime education or common examination practices in other institutions is sufficient. This is flawed because each university, especially a specialized institution like Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University, operates under its own specific set of entrance examination regulations and guidelines. Relying on generalized knowledge without consulting the specific framework for this university risks misinterpreting requirements or overlooking crucial procedural steps, thereby failing to demonstrate adequate understanding of the relevant jurisdiction. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the specific regulatory framework governing the situation. In this case, Admiral Nevelsky State Maritime University's entrance exam regulations. 2. Recognizing the established channels for communication and inquiry within that framework. 3. Prioritizing actions that uphold academic integrity and fairness. 4. Seeking clarification or assistance through official, authorized means. 5. Avoiding any actions that could be perceived as circumventing rules or gaining an unfair advantage.